Okay, guys, I try to stray away from these statements that every man must, because masculinity is a state of mind. It's a way of doing things. It's not a specific thing. You know, you can be an extremely masculine accountant. You can be, an extremely masculine ballet dancer or ice dancer. Whatever the stereotype is you want to kind of bust. But you can do almost anything in a masculine manner. But there are a few things that are universal. And one of the things I think every man should do or have is a gun, specifically a rifle. And I think there's a lot of reasons why every man should have a gun. I think every man should be ready and willing to defend his family, his freedoms, his neighborhood. It's the most basic male function, protecting those around you. And for American men, and I would probably say even most Western men, where it's legal, where you can do it, the rifle I suggest would be the AR-15, the black rifle. And there's a lot of reasons why I say that if you can only own one gun, you should own an AR-15. Now, there's also a lot of really knowledgeable people who would disagree with me. You'll talk to some guys who tell you, no, if you can only own one gun, it needs to be a shotgun. If you can only own one gun, it needs to be a 22 long rifle of some kind, and all of those are excellent choices. The problem with each single one of them is that they're not as good at everything as the AR-15s. The AR-15 is a do-everything weapon. A shotgun is excellent for home defense, for limiting kinds of hunting. The 22 long rifle, whichever one you like, the Ruger 1022 is kind of the standard, is excellent for survival, small game hunting, it's even pretty useful for self-defense. But for an all-around rifle that lets you go to war, defend your home and your family and your community, maybe do a little hunting, you can't beat the AR-15 for all-around rifle. And here's why. And it's this. The weakest point of any semi-automatic weapon is the magazine. The vast majority of the semi-automatic weapons out there are extremely good, well-designed, useful weapons that can last a reasonable user their entire lifetime. Where they fall down, where they all fail, is in the magazine. The magazines are cheap, they're mass-produced, and they break. And when the magazine goes, your weapon is useless. Well, not useless, but it becomes a single shot. Suddenly you went from having a semi-automatic high-capacity weapon to having a single-shot rifle with none of the advantages of a single-shot rifle and all the disadvantages of a semi-automatic. And the reason why I say the magazine makes the AR-15 the weapon of choice is because there are millions and millions and millions of these magazines out there. At least in the West, the vast majority of the NATO countries use, even if they don't use the AR-15, they use a weapon that uses this magazine, the AR-15 magazine. So that in any Tiawaki, world without rule of law, any of those situations, you're never going to run out of these magazines. They're always going to be available. Cops carry them, military carries them, National Guard carries them, federal law enforcement. There's enough of these in the civilian world, let alone the military and law enforcement world, that these will always be available to you. And like I said, they do wear out. When I was in the Marines, I believe I had 4 or 5 malfunctions out of my M16A2 in the 4 years I carried it. And as I recall, 3 of them are related to the magazines. Now I'm pulling that off the top of my head. It's been 20 years. But that's kind of what the numbers were. It was almost always the magazines that went bad. With the AR-15, these will always be laying around. The time comes you need one, they'll always be laying around. So that's why I recommend the AR-15. There's a few other reasons though. The ammunition is going to be just as available as the magazines because again, all the militaries and law enforcement use it, and it's been stockpiled in the hundreds of millions of rounds by law enforcement, government, and just civilians too. There's a few other reasons why I suggest the AR-15, and I'll tell you a story. I'll start off with a story. When I was in boot camp, we got our rifles and we going through this this training where we fixed bayonets, and we charged these big rubber dummies. They were 200-pound dummies with our bayonets fixed on our rifles. Full speed running, stab the dummy, hit the dummy, you beat the dummy up with the rifle with this bayonet attached. Full bore, I mean just going full bore. And all I could think of at the time was, my God, this rifle's never going to be good for anything again. Because I was usually using it like a club, you know, you're bang, bang, and the drill instructors are there and they're yelling and screaming and driving you on. And it wasn't 2 or 3 weeks later, we were at the rifle range and we were using those exact same rifles to qualify, and we were shooting them at ranges at the 500 yards. 500 yards with iron sights. And they were accurate and reliable at that 500, right after we just spent 2 whole days beating 200-pound rubber dummies with them. So to me, you know, you hear a lot about the AK-47 and whatnot. The AR-15 and this AR-15 family of rifles is one of the most reliable weapon systems out there. It has a couple of advantages over the AK-47. The first one being that it can hit things. The AK-47 is incapable almost of accurate firing. You get an AK-47 out to 100 yards, and it's worse than a shotgun as far as its groupings. The AR-15 will drive nails at 100 yards. There's a few downs. Well, there's only one downside to the AR-15, and that is the bullet, the 5.56 by 45 millimeter. It's maybe not quite as hard hitting as you'd like. When the rifle was originally developed, it was designed for the 308 Winchester, the 7.62 by I believe it's 52 millimeter. That is actually the perfect platform. That round in this rifle. And you might say to yourself, well, why wouldn't I get that rifle then? The AR-10 is what it's called now commercially. And you know, you're right, in a perfect world, if you sent a guy with a combat load of ammunition out in the woods against a guy with a combat load of ammunition of a 5.56 out in the woods, you know, the guy with the 308's better armed. You don't live in that world, and you never will. Again, the magazines are the weak point, and there just will never be that many AR-10 magazines laying around. And even if you could stockpile them, you can't carry them all. You know, if you're out, you know, defending your freedoms and fighting an oppressive government, you have to be able to use the weapons and the ammunition and the magazines from the government that you're opposing. And that's always going to be the 5.56. It's always going to be the AR-15. So that's why, even though you might be able to come up with a better total platform, I'm sorry, a better specific platform, you're never going to come up with a better rifle than the AR-15. You can hunt with it, you can defend your home with it, you can defend your freedoms with it. It will last your lifetime and your son's lifetime and possibly your grandson's lifetime. Never let you down. So, like I said, I don't like to tell men, you know, specific things they have to have or have to do. I think every man needs to be prepared to defend his family and his freedoms, and I think this is the tool that would let most men do that. Thanks, guys.